Welcome everyone to the Self-Improvement Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about leadership, and our mission really, from a big picture perspective, is to help young adolescents find more joy and success during their school and college years. So today we're joined with Dalton, you got me, this is Ian, and we have a special guest. Let's give a warm welcome to Jayson.
Pratt. He is a Chief Executive Officer at a new behavioral health.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, obviously, your position as a leader in this company, but also what the company does and how it came about.
Yeah, so a new behavioral health, the broad overview, we offer mental health and addiction services really across all ages. So as long as folks are verbal and can participate in talk therapy and things like that. We offer psychiatric services, nursing to support case management, which is really like sort of a service that connects all the dots. It's not therapy, but a lot of the people that we work with are lacking resources, whether it be transportation or really even like personal resources too, like the ability to organize, the ability to follow through. You can have a great plan, but if you don't execute, it's kind of tough, right? Mm-hmm. So the case managers help with that. And then, of course, like individual, group, family therapy, and things like that. How we came about is interesting. So myself, and I have two partners in the business as well, Matt Kahn, who's a therapist, Dr. Michael Boggs, who's a psychiatrist. We got together. We met as just part of other businesses, really. One thing that I think your listeners would probably really dial into real quick, since you said adolescence, is that your relationships are really important, and you want to form relationships and surround yourself with not only like-minded people, but good people who have, sort of similar, character traits and larger goals beyond like, let's do a business, but like life goals, And so they were a good match with me. We met as part of other companies. I was a CEO of another company before this. Nice. And we just saw that a lot of things were trending in the wrong direction. In the mental health space in terms of needs being met in the community, how companies were approaching the issue of mental health and addiction, trying to sort of piecemeal it. There's people who kind of do it a piece at a time. We just do the therapy, or we just do the psychiatric services. So we wanted to connect those dots and bring a system of care to folks on an outpatient basis. And so we started about a year and a half ago in Ohio. We've got, 4 locations in Ohio, and then I'm a New Hampshire resident. So, we're doing good work in Ohio, where I'm from originally, and myself and Dr. Boggs live in New Hampshire. So we said, let's bring it home. And so we've got 2 locations, one here in Keene and one up in Claremont. So, that's sort of the overview for sure. And,
nice.
And it's busy and it's going fast, and it's a weird business. It's one of the businesses that sadly, you never have to worry about whether you have customers. The need is so great, and so many people kind of need that assistance. And then throw the pandemic and on top of that, and the isolation that's gone along with that, and the mental health and addiction needs have just exploded. So for us, it's more of an organizational challenge of how do we keep up and make sure that we can help people who give us a call and knock on the door and meet the need. So it's been a lot of fun, and we try to do some good work, and that's sort of the overview.
Yeah, I love that there's a deeper purpose behind this. Like you mentioned earlier, like for you and your business partners, I would imagine like one of the things that not only brought you together, but has always probably kept you on the same page is that deeper purpose. And how do you feel like that deeper purpose portion of it ties in with you being a leader, in this position of being a CEO, essentially?
Yeah. So I was a therapist for a long time. I was, just doing the individual and the family therapy. That's what I went to school for. All my degrees are in either counseling or clinical psychology, or to do therapy. I didn't go to school to necessarily be a leader. I didn't necessarily, I don't have an MBA. So I came at it from a different angle. I kind of came at it from the inside out. And that's one of the things that we're sort of most proud of, is that ANEW is run completely by clinicians. Matt is a practicing clinician. I still have my licensure, still do some sessions right here in this office sometimes. I did a couple last week. So for me, it was starting as sort of a servant. I want to help. I want to serve. And then translating that as you kind of, grow into it, it kind of became a math problem for me. If I bust my butt and I'm in therapy 10 hours a day, okay, I can help 70 people a week. That's if I work every day of the week, But if I build a healthy company and I build a healthy group of helpers and servants, well, I can multiply that impact and we can, help thousands of people. So that's what kind of got me interested in switching sides, if you will. But I think what's really key in terms of translating it to leadership is never forgetting what the experience of the people you're leading is like. A lot of time in our field, quite honestly, you have the therapists and the clinicians, people that are helping. And then I say this very warmly and lovingly because I'm one of them now, but you got the business guys on the other side laying out the spreadsheets and working on efficiencies and kind of thinking of clients as numbers and thinking of therapists as kind of cogs in the machine. We do it very differently because I've been a therapist for so long, because we're all practicing therapists. We never forget what it was like to be on the front lines. We never forget what it was like to be in session. We never forget what it's like to drive home like completely wiped because you're hearing the worst of the worst and just dealing with people's struggles all day and facing, okay, now I've got documentation challenges. Now I've got to connect to my team. So it's not really a math problem for us. It's always an experience issue. And what is the experience of the people that we're leading? We try to keep that first and foremost. So that's like the number one translation for me is just never forget day one. Never forget when I got my degree and I got my license, I could sit down in that session and start ripping through my caseload. Never forget that experience and that excitement, but also never forget the challenges that the people that you're leading are facing, because they're humans just like you, and they have families, and they have lives, and they feel stress, and that, so anything you can do to kind of serve your people and be kind and aware of what they're going through, I think helps make you a better leader. At least I hope so, because that's our approach. So
I imagine it can get pretty emotional when you're dealing with these clients who are talking about their struggles and their habits and addictions. How do you deal with that, and how do you present yourself when things do get emotional?
So are you talking about from a provider standpoint or from a leader standpoint?
From both.
Okay, so from a provider standpoint, like burnout is real, and toxic stress and the accumulation of those negative experiences is very real. So there's a movie, The Green Mile. Tom Hanks was in it, where he's like a prison guard, and they bring in the guy who like can feel people's experiences, right? Yeah. He like touches them on the shoulder. He's one of the prisoners, and he like inherits all of their negative experiences. But then he goes to his cell and he gets sick, right? And he's vomiting up, literally like in the story, bees, right? So he just, It's like that for helpers, for therapists. I mean, you're sitting there all day long, locked in. You're kind of, connecting to people's experiences, and then you're driving home and like your chest is tight and your hands are like, clenched, and you're shaking. Not every day, right? Not even most days. But that buildup is very, very, very real. You're going into relationships, and I've had this experience personally when I was a therapist, where you're in a relationship, you're dating somebody, and you get home after a day of work, and they want to tell you about their day. And you're like, oh, that's exactly what I want to hear. There's another set of problems, right? And you're not really emotionally available to the people in your life. So on a personal level, on a provider level, it's really knowing your limits and constantly monitoring yourself. How am I feeling? We use the phrase HALT, right? Like hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you're experiencing any of that, like, be careful, right? You're in a state where you're not going to be your best emotionally. You're not going to be available. You got to start kind of investing in some self-care. From a leadership standpoint, we create consciously a lot of opportunities and sort of non-punitive systems to allow our providers to call a timeout, to say, I can't do it today, to invest in their experience and let them take that step back, because that's really easy to say on an individual basis, like, hey, take a time out. But then you go to work and you tell your boss, I can't do it today. That doesn't always go so good. You know what I mean? And you feel that inherent pressure, like, I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to lose money on this, that kind of stuff. So in our organization, we're constantly doing check-ins. We have personal conversations on a weekly basis. all the way down the chain. We call it rounding. How are you doing? Where are you at? Scale of 1 to 10 in terms of those stress factors. We'll tag people out and say, look, we need you to stay home for 2 days. You're going to get paid. But, if you can't, if you're not in a good place, how are you going to lift anybody else up to a good place, right? You're more likely to get caught down in theirs and kind of spiral and make it worse. So we try to make it a very warm, loving, and sort of accepting, supportive environment so that our providers do feel safe to take that time out. Because that's the number one thing is safety. Psychological safety from the people that you're leading. Do they feel safe enough? It's one thing to say, you can always tell me, but if you react poorly to that, or you punish them, or you chastise them, or it's a negative response, they don't feel safe. They're not going to take advantage of that, right? So ours is really promoting psychological safety and saying like, hey, when enough is enough, you let us know. Now the support mechanisms are in place, and those opportunities to, build yourself back up are there.
Your mission is to effectively support your clients and help them get better. And to be able to do that, you have to have good, effective communication and trust with the people that work for you and you work with. And so with that communication and trust, they're able to tell you when they're having too much and be able to step out, regain, and so they can re-engage and effectively deliver that help to your clients.
Yeah, I mean, I played sports growing up, right? So if you see a guy out there, he's a good player, but he's gassed, and you keep him in the game, like it's your fault as the coach when he gets blown by or gets trucked on the next play because you see he's not at his capacity, right? A little bit of stress is good and people can rise to the challenge, but if you recognize that and you're monitoring your team, you put the dude on the bench till the next time out, he gets his breath, gets some water, come back in, right? The other thing that you'll hear in a lot of organizations is like, well, we're client first, or we're like, our customers are number one. So like that is a lie, okay? And you guys need to recognize that. It sounds like, it's like a really cool thing to say, and it sounds like, wow, that's a caring company, but they're wrong. Your providers, your employees, your teammates come first because they serve the clients.
Yeah.
They serve the employees, right? So if you sit there as a leader and say, well, it's all about the customer, you've skipped the most essential part in the entire process, which is the person who serves the customer. So that when I say never forgetting day one, that's what I mean is like we always want to remember like we just don't exist without our providers, period. Doesn't mean they can do whatever they want, doesn't mean there's not standards, doesn't mean that we don't have expectations. But it does mean we're constantly monitoring that and making sure that this person is okay, the provider is okay, because they're the one that's actually serving the customer. My best way to serve a customer is to enrich my team, right? Because they go out and they serve the customer. Like most of them don't come to me, I'm just one guy, we have hundreds, if not thousands of clients, right? So, but I've got to make sure that those 40 or 50 team members, right? So it's really provider first. It's really, employee first. And as a leader, it's who you're leading. They really come first. And this is the hard part of leadership, even beyond your immediate needs, right? Leader feels like quarterback. A lot of times it's pulling guard. A lot of times you're in the trenches, eliminating obstacles, taking the hits so that your teammate can run with the ball, right? That's how you lead, by getting dirty. Not every time. Like it's fun. You get to make decisions. You get to pick out your organization colors. You get to schedule the retreats, and you get to make some of that stuff. But sometimes it's really about how can I eliminate obstacle for them, because then they'll perform at the best of their ability. So it's hard. It's hard to keep that in mind.
And I assume there has to be a balance there, because you want to be able to go up there and fight for your troops and do the frontline dirty work, and at the same time you don't want to be always down and in on the situation,
right,
so you can run the business.
That's right.
So you have to be able to balance being down and in and then looking up and out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's the role of management, and that's the role of what they would call middle management. Sergeants to generals, that kind of, I don't know the exact chain of command in the Army, but that's where investing in the right people to help you lead, recognizing like one person is never going to be able to do it all, and timing that up, right? So like a lot of companies will come out and they'll say, okay, this is what a company looks like, and they throw in a bunch of mid-level management, and it effectively disconnects you from that experience that I talked about as being so important to stay connected to. Other companies will go the other direction, where it's sort of like one core group will try to do it all and be all things to all people, and then the leader burns out, right? And so one is timing. When do I need help? And sort of you have to decide that before you need it, right? And whether it be a client count or when I'm spending X amount of hours on the immediate, so I don't have the other 20 hours to plan next quarter, that's when I've got to tag somebody in. And I also think that team building through recruiting and hiring is so key, because you can see a lot of resumes and a lot of people who look good on paper, but to me it comes back to that, like how they're going to mesh in the cohesion of a team. Do you have the right type of people on your team? So for me, emotional intelligence, compassion, empathy are going to be a lot more impressive than a PhD necessarily, right? If you have a PhD, wow, you've got some really serious credentials. But if you're cold, you're insulated, you're kind of focused on self, you're not going to function well within our team, because there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of crisis, like you said. I mean, if we have 20 clients scheduled, there's a potential for 20 people in active crisis to walk through our door in a given day, right? So your team has to be able to mesh and kind of have each other's backs, communicate well on a very regular basis, right? Like, it's not going to be once a month that you have to pull together. We have to pull together on a daily basis.
So how do you establish, one, good communication between your team and the individuals in your team? And two, how do you build good subordinate leaders that can take some of that responsibility from you?
Yeah. So on the first level, how do you establish it? It's got to be intentional, right? So you get so busy as a leader, you're kind of running around and you feel like, hey, I checked in. What's up, Dalton? You doing all right? Great. Hey, Ian, you doing okay? Great. Boom. And you think, well, I had communication with them today, but you really didn't, because you're kind of flying through, right? And so you've got to be intentional about it. Like, so for me, I like I said, I do rounding with every one of my people weekly. That's 15 to 30 minutes of check-in. We ask the same 5 or 6 questions. What's working well? What teammates are supporting you? Are our systems and processes working, or do you have opportunities for improvement? Do you have the tools and equipment that you need to do your job? Is there anything else you'd like me to know about? Okay, so we do that every week, and that's time for the follower, if you will, the manager, to communicate up. I'm not coming in with an agenda, things I need to talk to you about. I'm here to listen, right? I'm here to respond. Like, we schedule that, and it has to happen, and it has to be face-to-face or at least video, because I think faces are really important. I think in a text world and an email world, it's so easy to get disconnected that you've got to get the faces going, right? Like, this would feel different if we're in a phone call. We're sitting here looking at each other, we're kind of vibing this, and it just feels different, right? So be intentional about how you set up your systems of communication. We have operations team meeting every week. It's the same day of the week, it's the same time, and even within that format, we have certain structures, right? So my operations director goes first, my nursing director goes next, my intake and access director, right? So they have their time where they're running the show for that meeting, 10 to 15 minutes, and then I do the summary and the wrap up. Leaders have to go last a lot, right? And so if you set up your meetings, I feel, and it's your entire list of what you think is important, and then you go, let me hear from you, well, what do you think they're going to talk about? They're going to talk about what you think is important, right? It's human nature.
In situations where nobody else is taking initiative.
So tell me more about that. What do you mean?
So you say you want your other leaders to go first, to talk about what's important with them, what's going on, and then you come last. In probably the beginning of this, that could have possibly been a struggle for you guys.
Right.
How do you show that that's okay?
Yeah.
How do you get them to take initiative?
So role modeling is crucial, right? And so as I communicate with the other owners, like I said, there's 2 other partners in this venture, I've got to show that to them, right? And then you also have to kind of be a little bit of a therapist. So although I didn't, study how to be a leader or anything like that, a lot of my therapy experience comes into play. Right? So like asking open-ended questions, probing a little bit, right? You draw them into the conversation. You can use humor a lot too, right? Like if I say you've got 10 minutes to run the meeting and they rip through their notes in like 2 minutes and go, I'm good. You can kind of go, all right, well, we got 8 more minutes, with Ashley. She's my nursing director. Okay, so Ashley, what do you want to talk about for 8 minutes? Because you've got your bullet points out of the way. And just kind of make, play off the awkwardness a little bit. Questions for Ashley, comments from Ashley, that kind of stuff. And you just sort of play it up and you sort of increase that comfort level over time. What I like is we've got a good core group now so as we add leaders to that mix, they'll see it, right? And so, for example, we just hired a director of case management. She's observing ops meetings even though she's not working for us yet. So she's in her 3-week transition from her other job. So she has no pressure to perform because she's not in the business, but she gets to kind of watch, and she gets to see that over time, you know what I mean? Where like, oh, the director of operations went first, and then, okay, they kind of led the show. And then always, reducing pressure on yourself to be the answer guy. I mean, that's a big thing about it. I think when you're a new leader, you feel pressure. I know I did, to like, whatever comes my way, I better have an answer for it. Okay. But you're still learning all the time. And, I can sit there and they can say, well, when people check into our system, we're having A, B, and C problems. And I can sit there and get really smart and go, well, here's how I did it, and here's what I think. But I think if you're leading from a step behind and you're inquisitive, who would know that best? Well, it would be what we call our care coordinators, which essentially function as front office staff. So instead of rushing to like problem solving and like, oh, Jayson knows and he's got all the answers, and sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. Being okay in your own skin to go like, I don't know. Let's get these folks together who do it every day. Let's get their feedback and then worry about formulating an answer after the fact. In some situations, emergency rooms, hospitals, life crisis, yeah, you got to grab it and go, But every opportunity to pull more people into the conversation, to kind of go later in the conversation in terms of solutions, and asking a lot of questions. I'll kind of monitor myself. If everything you do is sort of like a bank account. And so if I make a statement, like that costs me $1. But if I ask a question, I get $0.25. And I always want to stay in a positive balance, right?
Right.
So I'm sitting there going like, okay, well, tell me more about that. Boom, 25 cents, What are the things that you've tried already? Boom, now I'm up to 50 cents. Does anybody else have some thoughts on this? Boom, I'm at 75 cents. Is there anything we're not thinking about? Is there anything that like our competition is doing that we can learn from? Now I'm at $1, okay? I've asked 4 questions. I've learned a lot of information in there. I'm a little smarter than I was when I first thought I might have an answer. Now I've earned the right to make a statement. You know what, guys? After hearing all this, I think the best course of action is boom. I'm back down to 0 in my bank account, right? So I shouldn't start rapid firing another statement behind it. I've got to go back into inquisitive mode. So I use that a lot to make sure that I'm pulling in a lot of ideas and getting feedback from the team before we just go with that old boss model of, you show up, you just rip off a bunch of like supposed amazing answers, like everything, and then, okay, get it done, slap the table and leave. Yeah. It's like the opposite of leadership.
And this is like emotional intelligence. At least part of it is just listening and being inquisitive, like you're saying.
Well, and active listening, and I would really say it's a big part. And how many people listen and sit there the whole time like thinking about what they're going to say next, right? Because what you've got to say to me is way more interesting than what I've got to say to you. I know that because what I've got to say is more interesting than what you've got to say, right? So in my own head, I'm like, oh, I got this really great thing to say. So you're talking, but like I'm not really there, right? I'm sitting there going, okay, And as soon as you take a breath, here comes that word salad that I wanted to get out 10 minutes ago when I stopped listening. As a leader, you have to check that impulse, and you've got to push through and go, no. Jordan Peterson, treat everybody like they know something that you don't, right? Like you can learn from them because it's true, right? It's like act like it because it's true. So I've got to kind of turn that statement stuff off and really start asking better questions. And that's a good sign too, to your question, Dalton. How do you role model that? One is knowing when to role model it. And if it's a lot of quick statements and then they shut up, quick statements and shut up, they're letting me know through their behavior that I have not engaged them, right? And I need to draw more out of it. That's time to ask more questions, not make more statements, for sure.
Yeah, that's really great. That's building leadership capital, like you were saying, getting $0.25 and spending $1. Listening is a big part of that.
That's really good.
We're generating some thoughts. Yeah, that's good.
It helps give your frontline troops and your subordinate leaders extreme ownership of the problem. Mm-hmm. So when you're going in there and you're saying, this is how we do this is how we do this, then they become more reliant on you being the know-it-all guy, and they can't really get things going on their own. Mm-hmm. But when you're out there and you're asking what their plan is, how do you want to do this, then they have the ownership and can make the initiative.
Well, transactional leadership is basically dead. I mean, the world has changed. I mean, you young guys are coming along. You've got you want input, right? You desire autonomy and the ability to make decisions. You want a clear connection between effort and reward, and you want to be challenged. You want to develop, right? And I mean, that's what this next generation is sort of expressing. So transactional, I say you do. And if you do it well, then I like you and I pay you 25 cents more an hour, right? Like that's dead. I mean, there's companies out there, there's a lot of companies out there, and in the mental health space that function that way, and their employees are sick. The turnover is insane. I mean, they're voting and letting us know through their mobility, like, I'm not putting up with this, right? And so they just kind of cycle through these different companies. Transformational leadership is where we're going, where it's basically like, we're in this together, you're engaged, I'm engaged, and it's going to transform the culture, right? And that's what's going to be like the future going forward. I don't know what's going to be next after that. Hopefully I'll be out of the game and you guys can sort that out. But like, that's what this next 15 to 20 years is going to look like. We've got to move from this transactional model to a transformational model. Like, one thing I'm very proud of with the new is we've gone 18 months in operation. We've had 0 turnover. Like, not one person has left. All right. Now, it started with a team of 4, then it became 20, and now, now it's up into the 40s in terms of people. But like, nobody's going anywhere because we structure everything around this idea of us and we, as opposed to you and I. Right. Like, it's not a hierarchy deal. It's not a power differential deal. Yes, I reserve the right to make the call sometimes as the CEO. I have to make those calls to bring clarity to the situation. But every available opportunity is, what are we going to do? This is about us pulling together, drawing people in. Even our pay structures, like, we don't pay flat hourly rates. We pay percentage. So, right, so if somebody generates X amount of revenue, they get a percentage of that revenue, because that establishes that clear connection between effort and reward, right? It also guarantees autonomy. You want to work 5 hours and make $100? I'm making that up. They get paid better than that. But you want to make, fine. You want to work 60 hours and grind and really kill it? Great. We support you. We put the supportive systems and communication channels in place to support your efforts. It's not a dictate. It's not you sit there at your desk for 40 hours. I own your time and I boss you around for 40 hours. Like, I'm exhausted even saying that. And that's a horrible work experience for you. So let's pay you in a way that we're on the same side of the table. Let's move you from that side and me and you on this side, and then put the problem. So now it's me and you versus solving these clients' problems. Me and you working on how to do service, not me trying to motivate you, aka either punish you enough or pay you off to get your butt moving and get you actually do something. That's how you get a lot of turnover. So transactional, forget it. You're going to learn about it just like you learn about like other antiquated systems, but like, that's not the future. The future is transformational, where you and I work on a culture and build a culture together. Engagement.
Yeah, I noticed you said culture multiple times, and that's been on my mind. Because when you have a solid culture, then there's shared values, there's a shared vision, and you don't really need motivation. Right.
Well, how does it function when I'm gone? I got sick. So the pandemic happened. Like, I got COVID. I was down for 2 weeks. I was crushed. Right. Wow. Company didn't fold. Right. There's nervousness. There's thoughts like, oh, I hope Jayson's okay. But like, you're just a person. You can't be there every second of every day. Now, if I was out for a year, I'd hope they would really feel my absence and I bring value, that they would say, I hope he comes back. But people just kept working. They pulled together, right? They kind of did that stuff. And I was really proud of that. Once I got back on my feet. So, yeah, I think it's just a way of again, aligning values to where we're together. And I know that's kind of a buzzword as far as culture. We got to build a culture. Culture's inside out, right? So you recognize you establish standards, not rules, because rules are oppressive, and like, it flares up the oppositional child in me. You tell me I can't, I'm like, I kind of want to do it now, right? You tell me I have to, and I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do that, So it's more about standards, like, who are we as a team? We establish those standards, how we communicate, how we talk to each other, using compassionate communication, things like that. And then you build around those standards, because that's aspirational. That's something that we can work towards together, whereas rules are kind of crushing and limiting. And I think the mistake a lot of companies make is they come up with mission statements, with value statements, they put the who we are on the board. But man, if you're not really living that day in and day out, and as a leader, you have to go first, and you got to be very consistent, right? You can't just be at the seminar, unleash the core values and go, here's what we're going to do, and then go back to being a jerk next week, right? Like, if you say, we're going to be compassionate, you better be like the most compassionate person in your organization, because people are constantly looking, not because they can't make their own decisions, but just that virtue signaling, right? Does he mean it? Was it just a platitude? Was it something we just paid a consultant to stick on a website? Or are we really living this? So if you're not willing to live it, definitely don't include it in your core values. Definitely don't hold it up as something that you stand for, because people will recognize when you don't. That's for sure. Yeah.
Integrity is crucial.
For sure.
Because you can't, be the role model if you lack integrity.
Right.
You got to be aligned with the same things.
Well, and beyond integrity, I think authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to know yourself. Like, who are you, right? Like, I'm not a super great detail guy. I'm not. I'm more of like relationship, strategic visioning. Like, I'm working on like the next 3 quarters. I'm not working on this quarter, right? So I need to surround myself with people who are strong in ways that I'm not. I've got to recognize that. If I run all the detail stuff through me, the company will suffer. I'll be frustrated, and I'll lack authenticity, right? Because I'll be out talking to people about details, and they're like, "Dude, he doesn't know. He's faking this. He's not keeping up with that stuff." Right, so I don't run the detail stuff through me. I find trusted people who are naturally strong in that area. So authenticity for sure, and I know those are connected, authenticity and integrity. But you gotta know who you are and just be that person, I think, and build your structure around that. It's okay. It's okay to have weaknesses. That's another big leadership thing. You said adolescence. I hope your audience understands. Like we know they have weaknesses, and they're gonna have weaknesses. Like, don't pretend you don't. It's actually a sign of confidence, I think, when you can go out and go like, that's not my strength. I need help. I need somebody to help me with that piece of it. You want to run a seminar, you want somebody to do some public speaking, you want me set the strategic vision for the next year. Like, that's me. You need somebody to crunch those numbers and produce some numbers that you can trust and some metrics. Like, don't give that to me. I need help, right? And everybody else is going to have their own individual strengths and weaknesses. So the quicker you can learn that, one, you can stop apologizing for them. Like, I did a lot of that early in my career. Like, I would apologize for the weakness and then go try to like make it a strength. That old like Michael Jordan thing, right? Like, I just find a weakness every off season and work on it. Like, that's great in sports, but when you're talking about like core of who you are, purpose. And I work in addiction, right? And I work in mental health issues. Like, you can work on what you're not your entire life and get minimal movement. Like, there are people who are going to be addicted their entire life. There are going to be people who are going to struggle with anxiety and depression their entire life. So, like, what's more productive and more satisfying, to invest in your strengths and what you are, or to spend all of your time apologizing and obsessing on what you're not? Like, you can waste, I don't mean to be dramatic, you can waste your entire life worrying about what you're not, and the same thing is true for leadership. I played football, whatever. I'm a bigger guy. Like, if I want to go and run a marathon, like, I'm going to have a very frustrating experience, right? If I want to go, bench press a ton of weight, I could probably do that. So, like, yeah, be aware and try to address your deficiencies, but invest in your strengths and don't feel the need to apologize for your weaknesses, because we all have them, definitely.
It's still good to work on your weaknesses.
Sure.
Although you should be focusing on your strengths.
Sure. Yeah. Don't ignore them. Right? But like, one of the ways I address my weaknesses is through hiring. Right? I hire, like, the example, the detail guy. Find really good detail guys that we work well together and address that. Doesn't mean I don't like try to understand the numbers. Doesn't mean I don't invest in their work and be aware of it. It's just kind of like proper placement for that stuff, so that I can contribute better in other ways, and let me spend my time doing that. So yeah, it's definitely not a message of like, forget your weaknesses and never think you have them. It's just don't at the same time let that replace investing in your strengths. Play to your strengths at every opportunity. That's why you were given them. Whatever you believe about the universe, you have your strengths for a reason. Invest in those. It helps the company, it helps the team. And it'll help you have a much more rewarding experience, either as a team member or a leader.
And how does that work within the team?
Tell me some more about that question. Like, how does investing your strengths work as a team?
Not just you and your strengths, when you are assigning positions and titles to your subordinates.
So flexibility is the word that comes to mind there, right? So like everybody's easy to get along with on a first date, right? Like, everybody is like a team player at interview. And I mean, understand that you're going to hire for certain roles, but you don't really know your people until you get in there and can start kind of have experiences with them. So 2 pieces to the flexibility. One, you're watching for what their strengths really are, not what they represented. A lot of people go get jobs because they need jobs, or I did this with my other company, so this must be what I should do for your company. Don't be afraid to kind of open their eyes or open your eyes to the possibility of other opportunities within the company, for sure. My director of client intake and access, she was on the operations side to start. I've got basically case managers who have gone into marketing. And vice versa. People who've been in marketing situations that they were better one-on-one with client contact and they've gotten into a provider role. So, if you're the guy who with all the answers and you're walking around and just moving people and kind of jerking them around, you're better over here, move. You better, like that's going to be a problem. So not doing it that way. But you invest in those conversations around their strengths. You are noticing all the time, hey, Dalton, I really noticed, that project that you worked on, you really did well with the numbers portion of that. Ian saved your butt on the presentation, right? Like he's the guy behind the microphone. But man, the data behind that was rock solid. And I know you did that, and I noticed that. Like, great job. Okay, if there's a role down the road that fits that better, we now have laid a foundation of recognizing your strengths and your successes in that area, right? So staying flexible, understanding that you're learning who your people are as you go, and not being afraid to engage them with conversations about other opportunities. You can kind of square peg round hole it sometimes. I hired you as an accountant, so I can only see you as an accountant, even though like your numbers are kind of weak. And every time you're in a conversation with somebody, like you flourish and you're great. Like maybe you need to be in more of a person-centered role. And we've made some of those adjustments. I mean, we're not a huge company. I mean, you're talking like 40 people involved right now. But even within that, we've made 2 or 3 changes along the way where people have kind of altered their course. But we were able to do that because there were many, many observations and noticing and, just moments where we engaged in conversation about that leading along the way. And we stayed flexible to it, right? Don't just be so locked into the role, I hired you as this. I think you just have to stay open, really, and be flexible, not only in how you see people, but in how they see themselves. So... yeah, it's not really a thing that you can, the hard part of this is it's not really a thing you can sketch out. Here are the 5 steps, right? Do these 5 things and you're guaranteed to accomplish authenticity. You're guaranteed to accomplish flexibility. I mean, everything's moving all the time. They're all moving targets, right? And so it's that awareness piece, it's that probing piece, it's staying in learner mode instead of expert mode. I think that's what's going to put you in a position to make the necessary adjustments as you go.
Learner mode, listening, were some really solid points. I feel like another thing that stood out to me during our conversation is like your relationship with your weaknesses. Is to address them, but to also realize that your time is best spent investing in your strengths rather than your weaknesses, and being authentic. So be someone who that you enjoy being, not someone that, don't be someone that drains your energy.
Mm-hmm. You can only fake it so long.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you try to be somebody you're not, like it's going to catch up. It really is going to catch up. And one other thing, we said relationship to weaknesses, like when we do employee reviews, we focus on their top 5 strengths. We don't even do weaknesses on their reviews. We'll do coaching and like opportunities for improvement, things like that. But, the traditional kind of like coaching session is, here's all the things you screwed up. How are you going to fix them? We got 5 minutes left. Hey, I do want you to know you're really good at A, B, and C. So like, we're glad to have you on the team. Take care, right? And you just got your butt kicked for like 50 minutes. And you get left with a little kind of pat on the back or the butt going like, but, here's your $2 an hour raise. So like, we're glad you're here. Like, we just want to invert that right from the start. So like when we review employees or talk performance with them, it is all about strengths. It is all about accomplishments. At first blush, it can feel like, well, yeah, but you're kind of like ignoring the hard stuff, but you're not, because you're investing in your people. You're giving them a reputation to live up to. Like, identity is so huge with people, and this is the therapist in me talking, but like how you identify and what you identify about yourself it sets the stage for everything. I mean, you're going to think your way into better actions more than you act your way into better thinking. You just are. Mm-hmm. And somebody who sees himself as a loser will find a way to lose. Period.
Confirmation bias.
That's it. And if you see yourself as a winner, you can get your butt kicked for years, and you'll find a way to win. At the end, you'll find a way to win, right? You can't hurt me. I looked into that a little bit. That dude just got crushed, but he found a way to overcome, because deep inside, that's how he saw himself. So if I'm with my employee and I have an hour and I want to spend 55 minutes, going, here's what you are, here's what we appreciate. Wow is a big deal. Like, wow. Because you just think about it, you guys are young, like the grind of just, getting a family, paying a mortgage, bills crushing you, student loans, everything's coming in every direction. You work in my field where you hear other people's problems constantly. You're dealing with crisis, life and death type stuff. I mean, you're just getting it at all angles. Plus, you're worried about your job. You're trying to feel safe. I mean, it is hard. It is hard to just grind that out every single day, right? So then you sit with your boss or whatever, and you're anticipating, another butt kicking, and you flip it and go, no, I see you as capable. I see you as a great communicator. I noticed, and it can't just be platitudes. Like, I just think you're a nice guy. Evidence to support it. And I know that because I noticed this. And this, your teammate was struggling, and you were the one that went over to help them for it. Like, just noticing things that reinforce that positive self-image. Okay, maybe they don't leave with a clear understanding that they need to get their notes in faster. But they do leave feeling like a capable, appreciated person who has strengths, who can do, right? They leave with all this evidence that they can. And the notes kind of take care of themselves, right? The detail stuff takes care of itself. We spend a lot of time as a leadership team talking about that, thinking about that, putting it into actions. How can we focus on what you did well? I'll give you one real example. So we had a person who was, insanely behind, and everybody has these stories, right? In their life, they're insanely behind in their notes. I mean, like, we're talking like a month behind. And remember, our pay structure is when you get paid, we get paid, right? So it wasn't really hurting us. But there was literally, I think, $25,000 in services just sitting out undocumented, right? So we're like, okay, we need this in, right? But you don't stress it out. You talk to her. What can we do to help? Hey, I noticed. Is there anything we can do to support you? Blah blah blah. We didn't write anybody up. We didn't. Nobody yelled. No jobs were threatened. None of that. It was just, how can we help? How can we help? We noticed, how can we help? You bring it to the attention. You're not avoiding it. We're having the conversation. We're having it in a way like, we know you're capable. You've done it in the past. You worked for us for 11 months. You never had this issue. What's going on this last month? Is there anything we can do as an organization? No tears, no crazy stuff. So she takes a long weekend and she gets it all caught up, right? $25,000 worth of services, which is a lot of notes. The tendency is, in the transactional sense, let's put it on paper. Let's start our paper trail. Let's do a coaching. Let's write her up so that she knows that we know, and we never have to go here again, right? I mean, we sent her a card and a gift card. Thank you. Thank you for getting caught up. That was amazing. Now, she dug her own hole, but it was amazing that you were able to dig out of that hole, right? I mean, that was so amazing. Like, how were you able to accomplish that? Well, then you get the rest of the story, right? That she has family situations that had happened over that month, mental health related, that she was like living at the hospital in the emergency room trying to help her children, right? Coachings and write-ups don't reveal that, right? You get a yes, sir, I'll try to do better, and you move on. This is about investing in people and building that relationship, right? Now, obviously, I don't tell the story if it doesn't end good, right? Since then, there's never been a problem. She's kept up with it. And we've bought that engagement and loyalty because we invested in that best version of her, that version that can sit down in one weekend and knock out literally like 100 notes. Like, that's insane for people who haven't done it. So that's who she is now. She's the person who is a machine. She's a documentation machine. You did 100 in a weekend. You're 5 behind now. I'm not even worried about that. I know you'll get caught up, right? So I don't have to fight with her and arm wrestle over every single thing because we invest in an identity of she can always catch up. So it's one example, but there's a million opportunities to do that stuff.
That's great. What I really liked about what you said is how when she has a problem, you're saying, how can I help you with this? Mm-hmm. And you're taking ownership. Instead of saying, hey, you're doing bad at this, I need you to do better here. Mm-hmm. And we talked about a lot of good things today, and just to include a few, or to mention a few, is, leading by example, leading from the rear, asking earnest questions, actually listening, establishing good relationships.
Focusing on the good, what people are capable of, and reinforcing a higher identity that will serve them now and in the future. I think that was a game changer.
Yeah.
Right here in this conversation.
That was a big one, for sure.
Well, and live your experiences, man. I don't know any of that stuff if I don't get trained as a solution-focused therapist, right? That came from the therapy world, like not the business world. So I'm not saying that there's not value in that. Definitely. I wish I had an MBA to go with my other degrees. I wish I'd done that stuff. But like, it really connects back to that authenticity and that integrity piece. Like, that's who I am. I'm a therapist who is in a position to lead, And so of course I'm going to apply that kind of stuff, right? Like it's like the old Steve Jobs thing, right? He drops out of school, he takes a handwriting class so he can still be in student or whatever that is, not handwriting, but some type of writing class, and he learns all the different fonts and the impact it has on people. So Microsoft Word comes out with like 100 different fonts, and people identify like that's why we like Microsoft Word over the competitors. It explodes and the world goes crazy, right? So for your people who are listening, you say you have a bit of a younger audience, like collect those experiences, and even if it doesn't make any sense as to why you're getting them right now, I promise you will have opportunities to put that stuff in play later in life. It all comes back around. It really does.
Thank you, Jayson.
Yeah, thanks guys. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, and you guys are so far ahead of the game, man. The fact you're even having these conversations, like when I was in my 20s, dude, I was not talking about how to be a better leader. So you and your audience are way ahead of the curve. So I'm excited to see what you guys are going to do. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure to have talked to you about leadership today. I never realized how good of a leader you really are. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, good. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.